I'm Abigail, Abby for short, 29 years old. For years, my sister Hannah ridiculed my choice to marry Jackson, a lowly farmer as she called him. Meanwhile, she flaunted her perfect life with Trevor, her finance executive husband who was supposedly a financial genius. Their world of luxury condos and European vacations made our farmhouse look primitive, at least according to them. But life has a funny way of turning the tables. When their house of cards came crashing down, suddenly our little farm became their only hope. Before I continue, where are you watching from today? Hit like and subscribe if you've ever had family members who thought they were better than you. Trust me, you'll appreciate what happens next. Growing up, Hannah was always the sister who had to win at everything. 3 years my senior, she turned every moment into a competition, grades, popularity, even our parents' attention. Whether it was her straight-A report cards or leadership positions in school clubs, Hannah made sure everyone knew about her achievements. Abby's just not as driven, my mother would say with a sigh when relatives asked about me. It wasn't that I wasn't ambitious, I just had different dreams. While Hannah charted her course toward corporate success, I fell in love with sustainable agriculture during my high school environmental science class. Our parents never hid their preference. Dad would clear his schedule for Hannah's debate tournaments, but would conveniently have important meetings during my agricultural club competitions. Mom would proudly share Hannah's academic accomplishments with neighbors, but merely nod with a tight smile when I talked about my interest in organic farming methods. When college application time came, Hannah went to an elite business school on the East Coast, while I chose the agricultural program at our state university. My parents masked their disappointment poorly. Are you sure that's the best use of your potential? Mom had asked, concern etched across her face. There are so many more profitable careers. It was during my sophomore year that I met Jackson. We were paired for a sustainable farming project, and I was immediately drawn to his quiet confidence and genuine passion for the land. Unlike the guys I'd dated before, Jackson didn't try to impress me with flashy gestures. Instead, he shared his knowledge about crop rotation and soil preservation with such authentic enthusiasm that I couldn't help but be captivated. Land isn't just dirt, he told me one evening as we watched the sunset from his family's farm. It's alive. It has memory. Treat it right, and it'll take care of generations to come. While we were building our connection over composting techniques and farmers markets, Hannah was networking at exclusive business mixers. That's where she met Trevor, a charismatic finance major with slicked back hair and an expensive watch. Their first date was at a 5-star restaurant. Jackson and I had our first real date picking apples and making pie from scratch. After graduation, Hannah and Trevor both landed jobs at prestigious firms in the city. Their social media feeds quickly filled with photos of champagne brunches, designer shopping bags, and vacation selfies from exotic locations. Meanwhile, Jackson and I were saving every penny to put a down payment on a small farm about 40 minutes outside the city. When Hannah announced her engagement to Trevor, our parents spared no expense for the wedding. They rented a historic mansion, hired a renowned chef, and flew in relatives from across the country. I served as bridesmaid, wearing the uncomfortable designer dress Hannah had selected. You actually clean up nicely, she'd said with a smirk as I stood uncomfortably in the bridal suite. Maybe you should try making an effort more often. During the reception, Trevor cornered Jackson by the bar. So, farming, huh? He'd said, swirling his scotch. Interesting choice in the digital age. What's your exit strategy? Exit strategy? Jackson had replied calmly. The land's been in my family for 4 generations. Not looking to exit. Trevor had laughed too loudly. Everyone needs an exit strategy, man. That's just business 101. 6 months later, when Jackson proposed to me on a hill overlooking our newly purchased farm at sunrise, I couldn't have been happier. We planned a simple ceremony in the apple orchard we were restoring. My parents contributed a fraction of what they'd spent on Hannah's wedding, calling our choices charmingly rustic, their polite way of saying cheap. Hannah arrived an hour late to the ceremony, leaving immediately after the essential photos were taken. "Sorry to dash," she'd said, ere kissing my cheek. "Trevor has a client dinner we simply can't miss. You understand." She glanced around at our string lights and wildflower decorations. "This is all so quaint." As Jackson and I danced under the stars that night, surrounded by friends who genuinely cared about us, I realized that despite my family's obvious preference for Hannah's life choices, I had found something real. Something that would last. "They'll understand someday," Jackson whispered in my ear as we swayed to the music, our friends and his loving family surrounding us. "Some things take time to grow." I nodded against his shoulder, hoping he was right but doubting my sister would ever see value in a life so different from her own. The first years of marriage revealed just how different our paths had become. While Hannah and Trevor purchased a luxury condo in the city's most exclusive neighborhood, complete with doorman and rooftop infinity pool, Jackson and I poured our savings into repairing the farmhouse and restoring the neglected fields. Our first winter was particularly challenging. The ancient heating system in the farmhouse failed during a cold snap, and we spent 3 days huddled around the wood stove while saving for repairs. When I mentioned this to my mother during our weekly call, Hannah called me the next day. "Mom told me about your little pioneer adventure," she said with that familiar, condescending tone. "You know, normal people just turn up the thermostat. Trevor and I are actually looking at installing a smart home system. It regulates everything automatically." "That sounds nice," I replied, not wanting to argue. "Different houses have different needs." "Houses? Is that what you call that place?" She laughed. "Trevor says you two are basically camping with plumbing." These comments became routine. Every family gathering turned into an opportunity for Hannah to highlight the divide between our lifestyles. The Thanksgiving after our first year of marriage was particularly memorable. We hosted at the farm, having renovated enough of the main floor to accommodate everyone. I had spent days preparing, cooking with ingredients we had grown ourselves. "You actually grew these potatoes?" Hannah asked, poking at her plate. "Isn't that a lot of work when Whole Foods exists? I mean, playing in the dirt seems fun and all, but at some point, you have to be practical." "It's not playing," Jackson responded calmly. "It's farming. It's how food gets to Whole Foods in the first place." "Yes, but that's what other people do," Hannah said with a wave of her hand. "People like you too. The rest of us have more important things to focus on." My father chuckled, and my mother quickly changed the subject. Their silence was tacit approval of Hannah's attitude, and it stung more than her words. Later that evening, Hannah scrolled through photos on her phone, showing everyone their upcoming vacation to Bali. "We're staying in a villa with a private pool and personal chef," she boasted. "Trevor's bonus was quite generous this year." "That sounds wonderful, dear," my mother cooed, while my father nodded approvingly. When no one asked about our plans, Jackson mentioned that we were excited about the farmers market expansion we were planning for spring. "How cute," Hannah said. "Your little vegetable stand." "It's actually a significant business opportunity," I countered, feeling defensive. "We've been approached by several restaurants interested in farm-to-table partnerships." Abby's pretending to be a businesswoman," Hannah said with a patronizing smile. "Maybe Trevor can give you some pointers before you accidentally sell the farm." Again, my parents said nothing to discourage her behavior. My mother even gave a small laugh. Back in our bedroom that night, I finally broke down. Why do they let her talk to us like that? Why can't they see how hard we work? Jackson held me close. They only understand the kind of success they can see immediately, things they can show off to their friends. What we're building takes time, but it'll have deeper roots. His unwavering confidence gave me strength, but the pattern continued. Hannah's social media became a shrine to material success, designer handbags strategically placed in photos, new car announcements, vacation footage from Mediterranean yachts. Meanwhile, we shared our small victories, the first successful honey harvest from our beehives, the completion of the greenhouse, a favorable review of our produce from a respected local chef. Hannah would comment occasionally. Playing farmer looks exhausting. Glad Trevor and I chose the easy life winking face, or cute hobby farm. So rustic. Even as our business slowly gained traction in the local community, Hannah found ways to diminish our accomplishments. When a small regional magazine featured our sustainable farming practices, Hannah sent a text, "Congrats on your little write-up." Trevor was just featured in Business Insider. Different leagues, I guess. As our third anniversary approached, we had expanded enough to hire 2 part-time workers. The farm was beginning to turn a modest profit, and local restaurants were featuring our name on their menus. We had established a community-supported agriculture program with 30 local families. Yet when we shared this news at a family dinner, Trevor immediately jumped in with unsolicited advice. "You really should diversify more," he said, swirling his expensive bourbon. "Farming is far too dependent on uncontrollable variables. I could show you some investment strategies that would give you actual security." "We are diversifying," Jackson explained patiently. "We've added beekeeping, we're cultivating specialty mushrooms, and we're developing an educational program." Trevor laughed. "That's not real diversification. I'm talking about market instruments that actually build wealth. This hobby farm is charming, but it's not a serious financial strategy." "Not everyone defines success by their investment portfolio," I interjected. "That's exactly what people without investment portfolios say," Hannah quipped, and my parents chuckled. Despite these painful interactions, the farm continued to flourish. Jackson's gentle persistence and agricultural knowledge, combined with my marketing background, was proving to be a successful combination. We were building something sustainable, both environmentally and financially, even if my family couldn't see its value. 3 years into our marriages, the contrast between our lives had grown even starker, but not in the way my family seemed to think. Our farm had evolved from a struggling startup to a respected local business. We had expanded to 60 acres through careful savings and a small, strategic loan. Our approach to farming, using integrated pest management, companion planting, and organic practices, had earned us certification and a premium on our products. We'd built relationships with a dozen high-end restaurants that proudly featured Harvest Home Farm on their menus. Our weekend farm stand had become so popular that we were constructing a permanent market building to accommodate the crowds. We'd been featured in the state's agricultural magazine and had won a sustainability award. But none of this registered with Hannah or my parents as legitimate success. To them, success meant what Hannah and Trevor displayed. Their upgrade to a 3,500 square foot penthouse, Trevor's new Porsche, Hannah's growing collection of designer clothes, and their lavish vacations documented meticulously on social media. "Just booked our Christmas trip to Aspen," Hannah announced during a Sunday dinner at our parents' house. "We rented a private chalet with its own hot tub. The skiing is supposed to be divine." "How wonderful," Mom gushed. "Your life is like something from a magazine, honey. What about you too?" Dad asked, almost as an afterthought. "Any vacation plans?" "Actually, we're pretty busy in winter," I explained. "We're starting winter greenhouse production this year, and we're running a holiday market event series." "So, no vacation then," Hannah clarified with a smirk. "Just more dirt." "The greenhouse isn't dirt. It's hydroponics," Jackson began to explain, but Trevor cut him off. "Speaking of investments, you really should talk to my guy about these emerging market funds. They're returning 22% this quarter. Makes farming look like a charity case." "We're doing fine," Jackson said mildly. "Our business grew 40% this year." 40% of very little is still very little," Trevor laughed. "Think bigger, man." Hannah nodded in agreement. "Seriously, Abby, don't you miss nice things? Remember how you used to love shopping before you turned into Farmer Jane?" "I have everything I need," I replied honestly. "And the business is doing better than you might think." "Right," Hannah rolled her eyes. Trevor made more in his last bonus than you'll see in 5 years of selling carrots. I noticed something that day, though, something beneath the glossy surface. While Hannah was showing Mom photos of their new living room furniture on her phone, I glimpsed a notification from their credit card company, payment overdue. Hannah quickly swiped it away, but not before I saw it. Later, as Trevor held court about some complex investment strategy, I caught a detail that made me uneasy. The leverage is the key, he was explaining to my fascinated father. We're talking 5-to-1, sometimes 8-to-1 returns when structured properly. Jackson, who understood financial basics better than anyone gave him credit for, asked quietly, "Isn't that extremely high-risk leverage?" Trevor's expression flickered with annoyance. High risk, high reward. That's how real money is made. Not everyone has the stomach for it. Or perhaps not everyone thinks it's wise, Jackson replied. Trevor's face reddened. Says the guy who gambles on the weather for a living. The conversation moved on, but I noticed Trevor drinking more heavily than usual, refilling his glass when he thought no one was watching. Hannah, meanwhile, kept steering conversations back to their material possessions and status markers, as if compulsively needing to remind everyone of their success. That summer, we hosted a farm-to-table dinner event that sold out in hours. Local chefs prepared a 5-course meal using exclusively our produce, and guests toured the farm before dining under string lights near the orchard. It was magical and profitable. We invited my family, and to my surprise, they all came. My parents seemed genuinely impressed by the elegant event and the obvious respect our farm commanded from the culinary community. Even Hannah was temporarily speechless when the head chef of a Michelin-starred restaurant publicly thanked us for the finest produce in the region. The moment was short-lived. "This is adorable," Hannah said later, sipping the wine we'd partnered with a local vineyard to produce. Like a country fair, but fancier. Very on trend with the whole simple living aesthetic. Trevor's company is doing a similar theme for their corporate retreat. They're calling it rustic luxury. As the evening wound down, Jackson took my father and Trevor on a tour of our new processing facility. With the men gone, Hannah scrolled through her phone, showing Mom photos of a vacation property they were considering in the Hamptons. Trevor says it's a steal at $1.7 million, she said. We'd only use it for summer weekends, but it's all about the investment potential. Sounds wonderful, Mom said. You two have done so well for yourselves. I noticed Hannah's smile tighten. Well, Trevor works incredibly hard. 60, sometimes 70-hour weeks. The stress is unbelievable, but that's the price of success. Something in her tone made me look closer. Behind her designer sunglasses, I noticed faint shadows under her eyes. Her knuckles were white around her phone. Is everything okay? I asked. Perfect, she snapped, too quickly. Why wouldn't it be? When the men returned, I noticed tension between Hannah and Trevor. He'd clearly had several more drinks, and when Hannah mentioned the Hamptons property, his jaw tightened. We're still discussing that, he said curtly. But you said, Hannah began. I said we'll discuss it later. Trevor cut her off with a finality that created an awkward silence. On their way out, I overheard them arguing in their car, Trevor's voice rising. Do you have any idea the pressure I'm under right now? And you're talking about another property. As they drove away, Jackson stood beside me, his arm around my shoulders. They're in trouble, he said quietly. What do you mean? Trevor's over-leveraged. I can tell from the way he talks about his investments. And he's drinking like someone who's trying to outrun his problems. Hannah would have told me if they were having financial issues, I said, though without much conviction. Jackson just squeezed my shoulder. Just because someone looks successful doesn't mean they are. And just because someone isn't flashy doesn't mean they're not building something valuable. Looking out at our thriving farm, I realized he was right on both counts. Another year passed, and the contrast between our lives grew even more pronounced, though not in the way Hannah would have admitted. Our farm had become something of a local phenomenon. We'd been featured in a national sustainable agriculture publication, Our community-supported agriculture program had a waiting list, and we'd begun hosting educational tours for schools. We'd managed to purchase another adjacent 20 acres, expanding our operations significantly. Meanwhile, Hannah's Instagram posts had taken on a frantic quality, almost desperate in their display of luxury. A designer watch for Trevor's birthday. A spontaneous weekend in Paris. A new sports car just because it's Tuesday. Each post garnered fewer likes, as even her friends seemed to tire of the conspicuous consumption. When I called to check in, her responses were increasingly brief and evasive. "How are things going?" I'd ask. "Busy, so busy. Trevor's working around the clock on this huge deal. Game changer. Can't really talk about it." At our parents' Thanksgiving dinner, the cracks became impossible to ignore. Hannah and Trevor arrived an hour late. Separately, she claimed he'd come straight from the office. Trevor looked exhausted, with dark circles under his eyes and a constant twitch in his jaw. He headed straight for the bar cart and poured himself a double scotch before even greeting anyone. Hannah's outfit and jewelry were as extravagant as ever, but there was something performative about her enthusiasm as she described their upcoming Caribbean cruise. "We've booked the owner's suite," she gushed. "Private butler, personal hot tub, the works. Trevor deserves it after the quarter he's had." Trevor snorted into his drink but said nothing. During dinner, my father, ever impressed by Trevor's financial world, asked about the market outlook. "Everyone's saying there might be a correction coming," Dad said. "What's your take?" Trevor's laugh held no humor. "A correction? That's cute. When the over-leveraged positions start to unwind, it won't be a correction. It'll be a bloodbath." "Trevor," Hannah said sharply. "No business talk at dinner, remember?" "Your father asked," Trevor snapped back. Should I lie to him? An uncomfortable silence fell over the table. "So," my mother interjected brightly, "Hannah mentioned you're looking at vacation properties in Vail?" "Ask Hannah about that," Trevor said, refilling his glass. "She's the one shopping while Rome burns." "He's just tired," Hannah said with a tight smile. "This deal he's working on is very demanding." Later, as I helped Mom with the dishes, Hannah stepped into the kitchen, checking that we were alone. "Is everything okay with you and Trevor?" I asked gently. Her defensive wall came up immediately. "Of course. Why wouldn't it be? We're better than ever." It just seemed like there was some tension. Not everyone has the luxury of playing farmer with their husband all day. She cut me off. "Trevor works in the real world with real stress. Sometimes it comes home with him." "Jackson and I work extremely hard," I said, feeling the familiar sting of her dismissal. "Sure you do," she patted my arm condescendingly. "Growing tomatoes is just like restructuring multi-billion-dollar investment portfolios." Before I could respond, she glanced toward the living room and lowered her voice. "Do you think Mom and Dad have any significant savings? Like accessible savings?" The question caught me off guard. "I don't know." "Why?" "Just curious," she said quickly. "Planning their anniversary gift. Something big." I didn't believe her for a second. Christmas brought another troubling incident. Hannah had always prided herself on extravagant gifts, but this year she arrived with gift cards for everyone. "So impersonal, I know," she laughed nervously. "But we've been so busy, and these are from that luxury department store everyone loves." When Jackson and I gave her the handcrafted cutting board he had made from a fallen oak tree on our property, along with a basket of our premium products, I saw genuine emotion crack through her facade. "This is actually really nice," she said softly, running her fingers over the wood. "You made this?" "Jackson did," I said. "Each piece is unique." For a moment, she seemed almost wistful. Then Trevor called from across the room. "Probably would have been cheaper to buy one from Williams-Sonoma, right? Artisanal stuff is always overpriced." Hannah's expression hardened again. "Right. But it's a sweet thought." A month later, at nearly midnight, my phone rang. It was Hannah, and I could tell she'd been drinking. Hey, little sis, she slurred slightly. What's the secret? What secret? I asked, confused. To being so damn content all the time. You and Farmer John. Jackson, I corrected. Whatever. You two with your stupid vegetables and your simple life. Why do you always look so happy? It's infuriating. I was taken aback by the raw emotion in her voice. Hannah, are you okay? Is something wrong? There was a long pause, and for a moment, I thought she might actually confide in me. Wrong? Nothing's wrong. Everything's perfect, she finally said, but her voice cracked on the last word. Trevor's a genius, remember? Everyone says so. Hannah, if you need. Forget I called, she interrupted. Had a little too much wine at the charity gala. We raised $2 million tonight, by the way. For children or whales or something. She hung up, leaving me staring at the phone with a growing sense of dread. Everything okay? Jackson asked, rolling over in bed. I'm not sure, I admitted. That was Hannah. She sounded not like herself. Jackson sat up. You know, I've been following the financial news. There's serious instability in some of the higher-risk investment sectors. The kind of things Trevor was bragging about being involved in. You think they're having money problems? Hannah and Trevor. I think, Jackson said carefully, that people who build their lives on debt and speculation are vulnerable when markets get volatile. And the markets are very volatile right now. I thought about Hannah's questions about our parents' savings, the gift cards, the midnight call. Should I reach out to her? Try to help. Jackson took my hand. You can try, but she'll have to be ready to accept it. And that might mean admitting she's not as successful as she's pretended to be. Knowing my sister, that might be the hardest thing of all for her to do. 6 months passed with strange silence from Hannah. Her previously nonstop social media presence had dwindled to occasional reposts of old vacation photos or motivational quotes about weathering storms and temporary setbacks. When I called, she was either too busy to talk or oddly subdued. Our parents seemed confused by the change too. Have you spoken to your sister lately? Mom asked during one of our weekly calls. She and Trevor have canceled dinner twice now. She mentioned they're reorganizing their investments, whatever that means. I've tried reaching out, I told her truthfully. She doesn't say much. Well, Trevor's industry has been in the news. Some firms are having difficulties, but I'm sure they're fine. They're so smart with money. Meanwhile, our farm was experiencing its best year yet. The sustainable practices Jackson had implemented were paying off enormously. While conventional farms were struggling with drought conditions and rising fertilizer costs, our regenerative methods had created resilient soil that required minimal inputs and retained water effectively. We'd expanded our restaurant partnerships across the state and launched a successful online store shipping our shelf-stable products nationwide. The educational component of our business had taken off, with weekend workshops consistently selling out. We're actually going to need to hire 2 full-time people, Jackson said one evening as we reviewed our books. The business can support it now. It's amazing, I said, looking at our healthy balance sheet. We've built something real here. Jackson smiled. Slow and steady. Real wealth comes from creating value, not financial tricks. The following week, I received a text from Hannah. Can we meet for coffee? Just us. We arranged to meet at a cafe halfway between our places. When Hannah arrived, I barely recognized her. Gone were the designer clothes and perfect blowout. Her hair was in a simple ponytail, she wore minimal makeup, and her outfit was basic jeans and a sweater I'd never seen before. Thanks for coming, she said, fidgeting with her wedding ring, one of the few expensive items she still wore. Of course, I replied, studying her tired face. What's going on, Hannah? I've been worried. She stared into her coffee cup for a long moment. Everything's gone to hell, she finally whispered. Everything. The story spilled out between sobs. Trevor's genius investment strategies had involved massive leverage, essentially gambling with borrowed money. When several markets turned against him simultaneously, the losses cascaded. Their investment portfolio had been wiped out. Credit card debt had mounted as they tried to maintain appearances. The penthouse is in foreclosure, she confessed. The cars are being repossessed next week. Trevor's firm asked him to take a leave of absence while they investigate some of his trading practices. Oh, Hannah, I reached for her hand. Why didn't you tell me sooner? Tell you what? That you were right? That my perfect life was a house of cards. Her bitter laugh turned into another sob. Do you have any idea how hard it is to admit that your little sister, who you've looked down on for years, actually made the smarter choice? This isn't about who was right, I said gently. This is about family. We help each other. She wiped her eyes. Trevor doesn't see it that way. He says we're not really in trouble, just experiencing temporary liquidity issues. He's still talking about comeback strategies and doubling down. What do you think? Hannah looked up, and for the first time in perhaps our entire adult lives, I saw genuine humility in her eyes. I think we're bankrupt, Abby. I think we've lost everything. And I think it's my fault as much as his, because I pushed him to keep earning more, to keep up with this lifestyle I thought I needed. I squeezed her hand. Have you told Mom and Dad? Not everything. Just that we're restructuring. Dad still thinks Trevor walks on water. It would kill him to know the truth. They need to know, Hannah. Especially if you need help. She nodded miserably. Trevor's meeting with one last potential investor today. If that falls through, we have nowhere else to turn. That evening, Jackson and I discussed the situation late into the night. We could offer them the guest cottage, I suggested. At least temporarily. We could, Jackson agreed. But they'd need to understand it's a working farm. Everyone contributes. No free rides. Hannah might accept that, but Trevor? I'm not sure his ego could handle it. Jackson considered this. People can surprise you when their backs are against the wall. Sometimes losing everything is the wake-up call they need. The next morning, Hannah called in tears. Trevor's last potential investor had backed out after looking at their actual financial situation. They had less than 2 weeks before complete financial collapse. Mom and Dad are calling a family meeting at their house tomorrow, she hiccuped. I finally told them everything. We'll be there, I promised. Try to get some sleep. We'll figure something out. After hanging up, I turned to Jackson. This is going to be bad. He nodded grimly. But maybe necessary. Sometimes you need to hit bottom before you can rebuild. The atmosphere in my parents' living room the next day was funereal. Mom looked like she hadn't slept. Dad seemed shell-shocked, and Hannah's eyes were red and swollen. Trevor sat stiffly on the edge of the sofa, his posture defensive, jaw tight. Thank you all for coming, my father began formally, as if this were a business meeting rather than a family crisis. As you know, Hannah and Trevor are facing some financial challenges. Temporary setbacks, Trevor interjected. Every successful investor faces periodic corrections. My father continued as if Trevor hadn't spoken. The situation is more serious than we initially understood. They're facing foreclosure on their home, significant debt, and potential legal issues related to Trevor's professional activities. Hannah stared at the floor, a tear sliding down her cheek. We've spent the last 24 hours reviewing our own finances, Dad went on. Your mother and I are willing to help, but our retirement savings can only stretch so far. Trevor leaned forward eagerly. Any liquidity you could provide would be extremely helpful in the short term. I have several recovery strategies that could. Trevor, my father cut him off, uncharacteristically stern. Based on what Hannah has shared, your strategies are what created this crisis. Trevor's face flushed with anger and humiliation. My father turned to Jackson and me. Which brings us to why we asked you both here today. I felt Jackson tense beside me. Your farm, my father said. It's become quite successful from what we understand. We're doing well, Jackson acknowledged cautiously. How much could you get if you sold the south parcel? Dad asked directly. The 20 acres you purchased last year. I felt like I'd been slapped. Sell our land? Dad, that's not. Abby, my mother interrupted. Your sister and brother-in-law are about to lose everything. Their home, their savings, possibly even Trevor's career if these legal issues escalate. We're talking about 20 acres out of, what, 80? The farm is an integrated system, Jackson began to explain. Each piece. Cut the farmer talk, Trevor snapped, his composure cracking. This is a simple asset liquidation question. Those 20 acres would cover our immediate debts and give me time to rebuild. It's not that simple, I said, stunned by their presumption. That land isn't just sitting there. It's productive. It's part of our business plan. It's our livelihood. Playing in the dirt is your hobby, Trevor said dismissively. This is our actual life on the line. Hannah finally looked up. Abby, please. We have nowhere else to turn. What about your designer wardrobe? I asked, anger rising. Your jewelry? The art collection you bragged about. Already listed for sale, she said quietly. It won't be enough. Not nearly enough. My father cleared his throat. Abby, I know this is a difficult request. But family helps family. Your sister would do the same for you. Would she? I challenged, years of hurt bubbling to the surface. Hannah has spent years mocking our choices, belittling our work, treating us like we were beneath her. Now suddenly we're supposed to dismantle what we've built to save her. That's not fair, my mother protested. Isn't it? I stood up, too agitated to remain seated. Every family gathering, every phone call, every social media comment, Hannah made it clear she thought our life was a joke. Playing farmer. Dirty vegetables. Quaint little hobby. Those were her words. Hannah had the grace to look ashamed. And now, I continued, you want us to sell part of our farm, not loan money, not offer temporary help, but permanently sell the land we work, so Trevor can have another chance to gamble it away? Now wait just a minute. Trevor stood too, pointing his finger at me. You have no idea what you're talking about. The market conditions that affected my portfolio were unprecedented. No, Jackson said quietly, speaking for the first time since the confrontation began. They weren't. All eyes turned to him. May I speak frankly? He asked, his calm voice a contrast to the emotional tension in the room. My father nodded, looking slightly relieved at Jackson's reasonable tone. Jackson took a deep breath. First, let me address the request to sell part of our farm. It's not possible, and I'd like to explain why. The room fell silent as Jackson began to speak, his voice steady and authoritative in a way my family had never heard before. Our farm isn't a collection of separate assets that can be carved up and sold off piecemeal, he explained. It's an integrated ecosystem. The south parcel you're asking about contains our main water retention system that irrigates the entire property. It includes pollinator habitats that support our fruit production. The rotation patterns between all our fields maintain soil health without chemical inputs. He leaned forward, eyes meeting each family member's gaze in turn. Selling that land wouldn't just reduce our acreage, it would fundamentally compromise the entire operation we've built. Surely there are conventional alternatives to these, holistic methods, Trevor argued, though with less conviction. Yes, Jackson nodded. We could switch to chemical fertilizers, pesticides, and irrigation from the municipal water supply. Our costs would triple, our certification would be lost, and we'd be just another struggling conventional farm instead of the profitable organic operation we've built. My father frowned. Profitable? Just how profitable is this farm of yours? Jackson and I exchanged a glance, and he gave me a slight nod. Last year, I said, our net profit was just under $400,000. The shock on everyone's faces would have been comical under different circumstances. That's impossible, Trevor blurted. Small farms don't make that kind of money. Conventional small farms often don't, Jackson agreed. But we're not conventional. We've created multiple revenue streams, direct-to-consumer sales, restaurant partnerships, value-added products, educational programs. And we do it all with minimal debt and low overhead. 400,000, my mother repeated weakly. And we're projecting growth of about 20% this year, I added. Those 20 acres you want us to sell are expected to add another 100,000 to our annual revenue once fully operational. My father looked dumbfounded. Why didn't you tell us you were doing so well? The question stung. We tried, Dad, for years. But no one wanted to hear about sustainable agriculture or regenerative business models. You were all too busy admiring Hannah and Trevor's penthouse views and luxury vacations. Hannah had tears streaming down her face now. I had no idea, she whispered. You never asked, I said simply. You just assumed our life was worth less than yours because it didn't look like what you valued. An uncomfortable silence fell over the room. So you won't help us, then, Trevor finally said, bitterness edging his voice. Despite your surprising success. Jackson shook his head. That's not what we're saying at all. We won't sell our land because that would destroy what we've built. But we are offering help. Just not in the form of cash to continue an unsustainable lifestyle. What kind of help, then? My father asked cautiously. I took a deep breath. We have a guest cottage on the property. It's small but comfortable. You're welcome to stay there while you figure out your next steps. We're also hiring. We need help with the farm store, the online business, and field work. You expect me to become a farmhand? Trevor looked incredulous. I expect you to contribute if you're living on our property, Jackson said firmly. The positions pay fair wages. You'd be employees, not charity cases. It would give you a chance to rebuild from a stable foundation. Manual labor, Trevor scoffed. I have an MBA from Wharton. And look where that got you, my father said suddenly, surprising everyone. He turned to Trevor with unexpected sternness. You promised to take care of my daughter. Your fancy degrees and investment strategies have left her facing bankruptcy and homelessness. I think you should seriously consider their offer. Trevor's face flushed red. This is ridiculous. There are other options. My network. Your network isn't returning your calls, Hannah interrupted, her voice small but clear. You know that. She looked up at me, real humility in her expression. What would my job be? The tension in the room shifted perceptibly. You have a marketing background, I said, hope flickering. We could use help with our online presence, managing the farm store, coordinating events. I could do that, she nodded slowly. Hannah, you can't be serious. Trevor stood up. This is beneath us. Beneath us. Hannah's voice sharpened. We're about to be homeless, Trevor. My little sister is offering us shelter and employment when everyone else has turned us away. What exactly is beneath us right now? The truth of her words hung in the air. Trevor, Jackson said quietly, farming teaches you quickly that there's no shame in honest work. Pride doesn't pay bills. Results do. Trevor stared at him for a long moment, then at Hannah, who held his gaze steadily. Something passed between them, a reckoning, perhaps, or a realization. I need some air, he finally said, and walked out of the house. In the silence that followed, Hannah wiped her eyes. He might not come around. He might not be able to accept this. That would be his choice, I said gently. And if he doesn't, she asked, vulnerability naked on her face. If he can't let go of who he thought he was? Then you have a different decision to make, my mother said, reaching for Hannah's hand. About who you want to be. The next few weeks were a whirlwind of change. Hannah moved into our guest cottage alone. Trevor had indeed refused the arrangement, choosing instead to stay with a former colleague while pursuing opportunities in another city. Their separation became official a month later. My sister approached her new life with surprising grace. The woman who once mocked our quaint little farm now immersed herself in learning every aspect of the business. She leveraged her marketing skills to expand our online presence, bringing in customers from across the country. She worked alongside us in the fields when needed, designer clothes replaced by practical work where manicured nails surrendered to honest dirt. I never understood before, she told me one evening as we sat on her cottage porch, watching the sunset over the fields. the satisfaction of this. Creating something real. It's not always easy, I reminded her. Farming has plenty of heartbreaks. Different from my old heartbreaks, she mused. When crops fail, at least you know you're at the mercy of nature, not human greed or pride. My parents underwent their own transformation. They began visiting the farm regularly, my father taking genuine interest in our operations, my mother helping with the farm store on busy weekends. They apologized, in their way, for years of dismissing our choices. We were wrong, my father admitted one day as he helped Jackson repair a tractor. Success looks different than I thought. A year after the family confrontation, we hosted a harvest festival on the farm. Hundreds of community members came to celebrate. Hannah had organized the entire event, coordinating local vendors, activities, and a farm-to-table dinner. As twilight fell, lanterns illuminated the tables set up in the orchard. Hannah clinked her glass and stood to address the gathering. A year ago, I thought I had lost everything, she said, her voice strong and clear. My marriage, my home, my identity. What I didn't realize was that I had been measuring my life with the wrong metrics all along. She gestured to the abundant tables, the community gathered around them. True wealth isn't in your bank account or your possessions. It's in creating real value, in nurturing relationships, in building something sustainable. My sister and brother-in-law understood this long before I did. She raised her glass toward where Jackson and I sat. They offered me more than shelter when I needed it. They offered me a new way to see the world. For that, I'll be forever grateful. Later, as we cleared dishes together, I asked Hannah if she had any regrets. About Trevor, she considered. Sometimes. Mostly I regret that he couldn't let go of the illusion. He's still chasing the same mirages, just in a different city now. And you? I asked. Do you miss your old life? Hannah looked across the farm at the fields silvered by moonlight, the contented guests lingering over dessert, the solid cottage that had become her home. I miss the certainty, she admitted. The belief that I knew exactly what success looked like. But I don't miss the emptiness. Or the fear that it could all disappear overnight, which it did. She smiled at me, a genuine smile without the competitive edge that had defined our relationship for so long. You chose the path with deeper roots, Abby. It just took me losing everything to recognize its value. As we finished cleaning up, guests approached to thank us for the evening. Many were regular customers, some were restaurant partners, others were new friends Hannah had made since joining the farm. Each interaction was warm, authentic, a stark contrast to the superficial networking events that had filled her previous life. That night, Jackson and I sat on our porch swing, his arm around my shoulders. Did you ever imagine this outcome? I asked him. When Hannah and Trevor were looking down on us all those years, he chuckled softly. Not specifically. But I've always believed that building something real would ultimately be recognized for its value. True worth has a way of revealing itself over time. Like slow-growing trees, I murmured. Exactly. He kissed my temple. The strongest ones take the longest to mature, but they weather every storm. The next morning, I found Hannah already in the farm store, arranging a new display of our value-added products. She developed a line of herb-infused honey that had quickly become our bestseller. I spoke with Dad last night, she said as I joined her. He asked if I'd help him start a small vegetable garden. Can you believe it? I smiled. People can surprise you when they open themselves to new possibilities. That should be on one of our product labels, she laughed. Speaking of which, I've been thinking about expanding the gift box program for the holidays. As she enthusiastically outlined her ideas, I marveled at the transformation. The sister who once mocked my life choices was now fully invested in the same vision, bringing her own unique talents to strengthen what we'd built. The journey hadn't been easy for any of us. There had been painful reckonings, difficult conversations, and adjustments on all sides. But through it all, the farm had done what it does best, provided solid ground on which to build a new beginning. What about you? Have you ever had to completely rethink what success means in your life? Or help someone through a similar transformation? Share your stories in the comments below. And if you found value in our journey, please like and subscribe to hear more lessons from the farm. Remember, the most beautiful growth often happens after the hardest storms. Thank you for listening, and may you find rich soil for whatever you're cultivating in your own life.